What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Real Ones Canes podcast. He is Brandon O'Doy. Follow him on the X at Brandon_O'Doy. I am Brian the Beast London. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast. Please feel free to follow the show at Real Ones Canes. And do us a favor. If you're listening to this, subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening to this right now. We are available everywhere. Spotify and Audible and Apple. And if you're watching these beautiful faces, do us a favor and subscribe. Smash that subscribe button, as they say. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the bell. Join the YouTube community. And just to promote myself, I'm now on the TikTok with the kids. So I'll be doing some Cane stuff on there and some other stuff. So go follow me on the TikTok at Miami Radio Beast. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens on the TikTok. All sorts of cool stuff on there. But Brandon, they're in fall camp. The first scrimmage of fall was this past weekend. Evidently, the offense won based on a huge third down conversion. A mysterious third down conversion sparked the offense. I don't know what happened on that third down conversion, but that's all I got out of the minute and a half that Mario spoke after the scrimmage to Don Bailey Jr. I also know Mish Powell got an interception. That's about all I know about the scrimmage. But, we're in the middle of fall camp. And I went back and listened and watched all the interviews. And we're at that time in fall where no one is saying anything. Everyone's great. Everyone's great in this locker room. All these guys are good. Everyone's good. No one's giving away anything. That's where we are at this time in fall. And you know what? I'm okay with it. I'm okay. Let's just keep the mouth shut. Let's not say any kind of bulletin board material, and let's get out there and work our butts off.
Yeah, Beast. I mean, as you know, it's talking season right now, in addition to the fact that, most of these teams are trying to get through camp, and really what camp is about is becoming a cohesive unit, knowing what your scheme is, knowing what you're doing offensively and defensively. Most important about camp, get out of there as injury-free as you possibly can. And so the good news is so far, there have not been major injuries to key guys. Now, there are some injuries that are happening.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes that I have been made privy to that I will not disclose. I'm not concerned yet. There are some nicks, there's some dings, there's some things that are being, nursed.
I will say this.
Texas, where you lost two running backs. You get what I'm saying?
I will say this. In Lance Guidry's presser a few days ago, he did mention that there were some Nick guys up on the defense. He didn't say names or what have you. So I kind of felt like, listen, that stuff's going to happen in fall camp, and you don't worry until you have to worry.
Right. And the beautiful thing about what Mario Cristobal has done is there's a considerable amount of depth on this team. And outside of Cam Ward, it's hard to really think about a guy going down that could create like chaos. And so that's actually something that's positive. And it's just a new world down in Coral Gables.
We talked about the depth last week, especially on offense, as it relates to running back, wide receiver, offensive line. As I was watching the interviews that have happened over the last week with all the players, that defensive line depth is also pretty crazy, both outside and inside. They've been managed to build that up. Now, you could talk about the back end, and not necessarily depth, although some, I think they could have used one or two more guys there, but veteran depth could be an issue. But you can definitely see the difference in this team versus 2 years ago, depth-wise.
Yeah, no, it's a real nice problem to have depth-wise. You're probably looking at Ruben Bain, Tyler Barrow on the ends, Mesidor, and possibly the gentleman from Michigan State on the inside.
Yep, Barrow.
There's a lot of positive momentum about Justin Scott, the 5-star. There's a lot of people are buzzing about him. There's another young man from Marshall that's challenging at the defensive end position. It seems like they feel really good about Barrow, Tyler, and him. Bain is kind of in a league of his own. And of course, you're going to see him moved around depending on what the down is and what the distance is. There's a lot of depth to watch. There's some young guys who are going to make some noise. Scott's one of those guys. And there's some others who will have, a role to play. But from what I'm understanding, the defense isn't quite as far along as the offensive side of the ball currently as camp stands. This Saturday will be another scrimmage. So there'll be more to sort of ascertain about exactly where the Hurricanes are 2 weeks into camp. In these scrimmages, you just really look at, who's making plays, because it usually does translate. Like, you very rarely see a guy making plays in the game that he's not making in practice.
Right.
And so that's generally what you're looking for. And by all accounts, Cam Ward is who people say he is, which to me, that's the biggest thing that you want to take away from these first couple of weeks in camp.
You talk about kid from Marshall, that's Elijah Alston, the fourth Elijah on the team. Elijah Alston, who came from Marshall out of Chesapeake, Virginia. And yeah, I had a chance to listen to him speak this week, and he seems fired up and ready to go. But they've certainly made an impact on this defensive line in the transfer portal. They've brought some necessary guys in. Barron from Tennessee and Barrow from Michigan State, Alston from Marshall. A bunch of guys have come in and started to make an impact already. And that's one of the benefits of the portal, is you can bring guys that have experience in to have an immediate impact on your team.
Yeah, well, don't forget, you got rid of a lot of guys too. You got rid of Harrison Hunt. You got rid of the young man from up the road in Fort Pierce, Treasure Coast area, who went to SMU. You lost pieces. Najee Kelly was, a guy that left as well. And so you had to replace guys. You had bodies that you had to replace. So it wasn't like you went shopping because you just, felt like you needed something to do. There were legit, holes to fill.
It's too early to know, but just in my mind, I feel like there was a net gain there between what you lost and what you gained from the transfer portal. I feel like Miami did okay as it relates to replacing the guys that left.
Without question, and not to downgrade the young man or talk negatively about him, but Najee Kelly has had some struggles at UCF, some off the field stuff, and Harrison Hunt had been in the program for what seemed like forever and hadn't really done a ton. The big loss to me was the kid that went to SMU. His name I can't think of to save my life right now, but he was the guy that I felt like was the unsung hero of that defense, particularly on third down, and what like Guidry likes to do with applying pressure and all of the situations surrounding that. And when you go out and you replace him with a guy like Tyler Barron, and you had the young man from Marshall, I think you upgraded big time. And then you went out and got a couple of really dynamic, multi-use guys who are freshmen, even guys who can play that jack position where you kind of drop back, what Najee Kelly played. You can drop back into coverage. You can rush the passer. You're more of a slender, still strong, but slender build with a lot of speed. I think it's an upgrade, in every particular way. And so you just have to be excited if you're a Hurricanes fan, but there is cause for concern, to think about, more plays needing to be made defensively. And, Mish Powell is Mish Powell. This is a kid that I think we've seen demonstrated leadership from. I think he's the new Cam Kitchens. But you want to hear more about guys making plays and more, them getting to the ball. And you don't hear about a lot of that. So maybe they're keeping it under the vest. My sources haven't revealed anything next level in that regard, but it's still a lot to like. We're just a few weeks away from finding out what we really need to know.
Is Elijah Roberts the kid you're thinking of that went to SMU?
No, Elijah left, and he was a big loss too. This young man left in the spring portal, and
right.
He played a lot. He played a lot last year, and you're normally my guy. I have to look to make sure. You're normally my guy that gets me because I know the people. I just don't know the names, but it doesn't matter because I think Miami's in a better place.
Jafari Harvey,
as, Harvey. That's it, Jafari.
Okay, yeah.
And he is he to me, he was an unsung guy because I would always see him coming in, and so you got him rushing in on one side, being like just a dog, and then you got Kiko Mainoa on the other side. Like it just, and that kind of, they played off of each other, particularly on passing downs. They had a lot of success last year. So to me, he was some sort of a loss, but I mean, I think he's been capably replaced. I don't think you'll miss the other guys that much, but yeah, I agree with you. I think it's an upgrade in every capacity with regard to the defensive line, and then getting Mesidor back from injury is just the icing on the cake.
So let me ask you this big picture question, because when you think about Miami trying to make it back to the top echelon, all right, now you have to start comparing where is Miami as it relates to the big dogs, right? The Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Texases, whoever it may be. As you take a step back, 35,000-foot view, talent-wise, depth-wise, where do you see this Miami team as it relates to those programs that have set the tone?
Well, they're not near Texas, Ohio State, Bama, Oregon, and Georgia. That's the upper echelon of college football right now. Miami's a few years away from being those programs because those programs have been winning and been recruiting at a high level for a very long time. Texas, not so much. They only recently have kind of revitalized themselves. But then I think they're in that next group of the Oklahomas, the Michigans, they're at the very bottom of that next group. But they're, the Oklahoma States, basically the strike group, the group that's, Ole Miss, talented enough to beat you if they do mostly everything right. Georgia's going to be favored in every game that they play this year. That's just how they're going to be. Ohio State's going to be favored in most games that they play. Same with Texas. That may happen. They've had a few injuries. So when you talk about teams like that, those are juggernaut type teams. Michigan lost a tremendous amount. They're going through a lot of issues with this, Connor Stallion stuff. There are a lot of, there's doubt about whether or not they can, do what they did last year, which is win a national championship. Notre Dame, to me, seems like fool's gold. I hate to say that to a former Kane head coach and, Al Golden and, whatever they have going on up at South Bend, but I don't see the talent being stacked into, and you didn't do enough in the portal to make me believe in you, especially being a top 10 team. Now, when you talk about Miami, okay, well, you say, well, what have they done to deserve it? Not much, but they just upgraded pretty much every position that they were weak at with guys who've proven things. And the expectation is that they're going to be better. I mean, and not to mention the guys that were good all come back with the exception of Kobe Young. So at the end of the day, you look pretty good. You concerned about the safety position. You go out and grab a Mish Powell. You got some guys who you expect to come in and be key aspects for you. But like I said, you can't solidify every position. At some point, you got to go out in there and coach.
So 4 or 5 years ago, if I took the entire Miami team and lined them or put them on the field, and then ran out in Alabama or Georgia or one of these strong teams at the time 4 or 5 years ago, I would have noticed a difference. On one side would have been some big freaking like look the part dudes, and on the other side it would have been like they don't look like they're in the same like division.
It's funny you bring that up. A guy that I spoke to got the impression that this was the closest that Miami looked to those Bama type, SEC type teams. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've heard in the past several days. They look the part. This will be a physically imposing championship looking team. Like I'm talking about the off the bus eye test.
Right, like when they run onto the field, right, against the Gators, they're gonna look like they belong on that field with the physicality and how they fill out their uniforms. Now, there's a lot more that goes into winning football games than just that, but that seems to have improved.
Yeah, and it starts on the D-line like we've been talking about. First of all, you go out and you have probably one of your best D-line recruiting classes ever or near ever. So that doesn't hurt. And then you went out and had probably the best D-line portal class in the country. So you match those two things together, and then you bring back Mesidor and Bain. So it's like, I mean, it's love to think, but I mean, you got to go out there and produce, and that's what it's about. Like, can these guys produce when it matters the most? Because really, the only thing a D-line is necessary for is third and long or third and short or where you need a conversion, where you need a stop. And you need somebody on that defense to step up and make a play so you can get the ball back and have a chance to score or have a chance to maintain your lead. And that's the impact that we have not seen in this program for quite some time. And so you kind of, good programs, you kind of know somebody's going to step up. There are guys that do it on a regular basis or a semi-regular basis, and then there are guys who are capable. I think that this program has been lacking of guys that you're just like, eventually this guy's going to make a play.
Ruben Bain's getting all the accolades. Every national guy is saying this is going to be the most talented player to come out of Miami in a long time. You know him really well. You know his family really well. Is that type of pressure and spotlight, like, can he handle that? Or is that going to be something that's going to be too much for the young man?
No, he can handle it. He's not a kid that's centered on outside adulation. So, and I deal with you young people a lot with the college tours, with Hotbed, everything we do. Some kids feed and thrive off of what people are saying about them. Ruben can consider it, but it doesn't make him. He understands and he knows. Remember, his older brother was a D1 athlete. He's on the coaching staff at Miami. His older brother played at FAU. He's seen how hard you have to work. His older brother was good. He's a part of several state championship teams similar to his brother. But he went to FAU. My understanding, I don't think he got a chance to play in the pros. So Ruben is sobered by the fact that he knows how hard this game actually is. And he knows and understands it really only matters, what you do between the white lines. And then he also, if you're, being open and honest, he also realizes once he started making plays in the first half of the season, everyone adjusted. So he knows he's not sneaking up on anybody this year. He's the guy that everybody's going to be game planning for. So in order for him to have the impact that he had last year or even near close to that, he had to put in a tremendous amount of work. I think he's done that. He looks as good as I've ever seen him physically. But no, I don't think it's going to go to his head. But along those same lines, people I'm talking to inside the program or people who are outside of the program who've been given access have been saying, and I've heard this on a few occasions, there is pressure. Coaches feel pressure, players feel pressure. People are walking around and there's not a lot of laughter, a lot of chit-chatting. Like, people are locked in and they feel like there are real expectations for this team.
Where's that pressure coming from?
I think it's external. But see, I don't think it's just external. Golden used to talk about this. He was like kind of a media manipulator or a message manipulator. It turned out to be kind of all for nothing. But one thing he used to say is you can't be influenced by the noise, the outside noise. But I think a lot of this pressure is coming from the inside. Like, I think these guys think they're good enough and they're like, we have to capitalize. Like, when are we ever going to be this good again? And if we're not good this year, can this even happen at Miami? You know, there's all this talk about $20 million being spent on Ohio State. Well, the Canes, you know, what those guys make is not public. But man, if they ain't close, they got to be over. From what I understand.
Yeah.
This is not a cheap roster at all. And so, and we've talked about this on this podcast. How many times is Miami going to pony up this type of support before they say, you know what, we gave you everything you asked for? Can't be done.
Now, the question is whether they give in to the pressure or they rise to the occasion because of the pressure. And
that's what we can't wait to see.
Right.
There's an element, there's enough to like about what Mario Cristobal has put together. And like, him having success this year shouldn't shock anyone. Because, I mean, this program has kind of been like getting by, you know, since its glory days.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're getting by facility-wise. You're getting by recruiting-wise. You're getting by coaching-wise. You know what I mean? Like, how many head coaches have come from the staffs that have been here at Miami? I know of one, Manny Diaz.
Rhett Lashlee.
That's two guys out of what? Almost 20 years. Now go to Alabama under Saban. And ask how many coaches have been made head coaches from that group.
All of them.
Or go to Mike Leach.
Right.
For those Texas Tech teams he had. And how many of those guys became head coaches?
Ton.
You understand what I'm saying? So these are sort of measurables that get you in the framework of trying to understand, okay, just how much have we not had? You know what I'm saying? Because look at Kirby Smart. Look at all the guys who have become head coaches in his short tenure. I mean, you got Dan Lanning, you got Fran Brown, you got Dale McGee, you know what I mean, who's the head coach of Georgia State. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody. Will Muschamp will eventually go back to being a head coach if he wants to.
Brandon, there's no doubt that the greatest head coaches produce head coaches. I mean, go back to Pete Carroll, and you know that. I mean, look where Lane Kiffin got, and Sarkisian, and all these guys that ended up spending time with Nick also, but they were under Pete Carroll first. There's been a bunch of guys. Chris Peterson is put out some head coaches. Like, all of the greatest head coaches have made head coaches.
So to my point, if Lance Guidry, Shannon Dawson, and to some extent anyone else who has, I'd say Jason Taylor. These guys need to become head coaches at some point to validate what is going on the field. Because if they don't, that's indicative of the fact that you probably didn't have enough. Because in every other place where positive things were happening, head coaches were made every single time.
Yeah, there could be no doubt about it that is one of the marks of a good staff, a good program, a good head coach, is fostering guys that could become head coaches. All right, we're going to take a break. On the other side, I want to ask you a question that I've been pondering over the last couple of days. It's not that crazy, it's not that crazy, but it's something I thought about. And it has a little bit to do with that game coming up on August 31st up in Gainesville. We will get to that and maybe talk a little bit of recruiting because some lists came out of the top 25 kids in Broward and Dade, and I have to ask you about a couple names. We'll get to that and more on the other side. You're listening and watching the Real Ones Canes podcast. Welcome back to the Real Ones Canes podcast. He is Brandon O'Doy. Follow him at Brandon_O'Doy on the Beast. Brian London. Follow me at Miami Radio Beast. Follow the show at the Real Ones Canes. And also go subscribe to the YouTube page. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the bell. And wherever you're listening to this, go listen to this on Spotify, Audible, Apple, and subscribe there as well. Okay, Brandon, I was thinking about this. College football, we've been talking about this, has changed dramatically with the transfer portal, right? It's a completely different thing than it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. My question is this. Normally, it's Miami, it's Florida. This is as big as it gets in rivalry games, especially in the state of Florida. But Miami doesn't play Florida every year. So it's not like Miami and Florida State, and most of the guys have been through it. And with the amount of transfers that have come in and out and up and down and all around, I'm just wondering do you think those kids are thinking of this as a rivalry game? I what you used to have, right? Used to have like Mo Sykes would come back and tell the team about his 99-yard or 103-yard interception that he had in the swamp. That shut that team down in 2002. Or, Devin Hester could come in, the Hall of Famer now, and talk about the opening kickoff he returned for a touchdown against the Gators in the Orange Bowl. And I just feel like all of that stuff isn't as meaningful when half the team is just hired labor, kind of.
Well, it's not so much hired labor because Miami, Florida State still means something. But they play every single year. Right, yes, exactly. And as you were asking this question, I tried to think to myself, who's still on the team from the last time Florida and Miami played? And the only person that I could think would have been on the team, Zion Nelson, just retired because he was a true freshman.
Correct.
And he lined up at left tackle.
Yes, he did.
I remember he was there, and I believe that was Manny Diaz's first year as head coach. But at the end of the day, I can't think of anybody who is still on this team. And that just lets you know that's how long of a gap that it's been since the time that they played. And not to mention that, when was the time previous to that they played? Those were the Tracy Howard, Duke Johnson years. Duke Johnson just retired from the NFL. You know what I mean? Like Tracy and Duke are 30 years old. That's how long. Yeah,
I mean, it's few and far between, man.
It's not. You can't play every blue moon and have it be a rivalry. It doesn't matter that you're only 4 hours away. It's just.
Wait. Time out. How fast are you driving if you get into Gainesville in 4 hours?
It's 4 and 20 minutes, but you get what I'm saying. It's
okay.
I just went. I was there a few weeks ago. It takes 4 hours and 20 minutes, but. At the end of the season, I thought you were like, I don't need any Florida Highway Patrol people to be flagged by this. There are a couple who watch our podcast for sure. But the bottom line is this. It's just, is it a traditional rivalry of past with the programs? Yes. Is it a budding rivalry? Is it Florida State, Miami? Not even close. Is it a game that they're sitting around like, man, we got to beat these Gators? Yeah, but for different reasons. Because you lose this game, it affects in-state recruiting. It promotes the idea of SEC supremacy. And with one of their worser teams, one of their struggling teams, I should say, to use better English. But at the end of the day, you want to win it for reasons that have little less to do with the rivalry, if that makes sense.
But at least like back in 2019 or even before that, by the way, that game in 2019, that was the biggest disaster of a stadium I've ever been to in my life at Camping World Stadium. I will,
I
unless
love
it's
Camping World. I'm sad that we're no longer going there for the Florida High School State Championship for
okay.
football.
I mean, maybe it's better for high school football, but for that game, it was the unmitigated disaster. You couldn't get in, you couldn't get out, you couldn't get to your seats. No one knew anything, no one had any information. It was an absolute disaster, and people still talk about it to this day. But at that game, and even before
Game
that,
Miami should have won.
correct. But you go back before that, and at least if because you didn't play every year, but at least you had all those Florida high school kids that played each other, and they had that kind of intimate knowledge of the teams. But like just with the portal and everything, like the
They
rosters are
don't.
such.
No, it's not
Yeah,
so much the portal beast. Like Florida doesn't have any South Florida guys. They got a few guys. They got Tyreek Sapp, Alfonso Allen just walked on from Miami Central. They got Andy Jean from Miami Northwestern. And that's really it. Like, I mean, they don't have a
Cormani.
lot of guys. Now, I mean, there are going to be some guys, and Miami has guys from other parts of Florida, but
Right.
it's not like when Florida State and Florida play. Like, I mean, it's not like Florida State and Miami. Like, Florida State and Miami, there are tons of kids from South Florida on both rosters. Coaches coached on both. You know, you got Randy Shannon and Ron Dugans who coached at Miami. Like, there's just all kind of bad blood. You know what I mean? They're guys who played together, guys who played against each other. They were rivals in high school. Now they're rivals again in college. There's no comparison. Not that you said there were, but it just I don't like using the rivalry word, and I haven't used it when it comes to Florida. It's just a team that Miami has to beat. It's a team that's supposed to be down. It's a coach that's supposed to be on, you know, the chopping block. It's basically a team that, you know, you should out talent. And you know, it's just one of those games that you kind of have to win. Those are the reasons why I think kids are getting hyped, but nobody's coming in that locker room like, oh, this is a big rivalry. We're Miami. We always beat Florida. Like, those speeches aren't really. And I get what you mean by the portal, but you adopt the rivalries of the place you go. I mean, you don't need to be at Ohio State your entire career to know that when they play Michigan, it's a big game. You don't need to be at Harvard for 4 years to know when you play Yale, it's a big game. Like, the rivalries are assumed. Like, when you get ready to sign up to go be a Hurricane, you know your arch rival is Florida State. Same thing. If you go to Florida State, you know the Miami game doesn't matter what the records are, doesn't matter what the year are. This is a game that you circle on your calendar. So even in the transfer era, there's still the taste of college football. There's still that tradition, the things that we enjoy. There's still these inherent rivalries. I just think this one's weakening just because they don't play enough. And I wish they played more, but that's just what we deal with here.
Let's real quick. I mean, I'm not a recruit, Nick, but you know a lot of these kids. The Miami Herald has come out and ranked their top 25 prospects, junior and senior, in Broward and Dade. So I just want to throw some names at you just to get quick thoughts. In Broward, they have the number one prospect, the quarterback out of American Heritage, Roger Bell's son, Dia Bell. He's committed to Texas. Is he worthy of the number one spot in Broward?
I'd say so. He's a 5-star commit, you know, fairly tall, super athletic guy. Got a rocket for an arm. Outside of him being, you know, from really good bloodlines, he's a humble kid. This will be an important year because they fell just short of reaching the state championship last year. Some of that sits on his shoulders, but it was his first year as a varsity starter. So you come back in year 2, you've got to show the maturation, you got to show the growth. He's obviously well thought of in the college football world. He got an offer to Texas, and he was able to commit to that from Florida. So when Florida's taking when Texas is taking a Florida quarterback, you know, that's got to tell you something. You know, they don't have to come out of their region to take a quarterback, and they chose to do so. So at the end of the day, I know Miami was courting Dia. I know Raja. That's why the first came to my head. But at the end of the day, I think he's a solid kid.
The rest of the top five, if you're keeping track: Derek Cooper out of Chaminade, Jabari Brady out of Chaminade, Justice Fitzpatrick, the corner out of St. Thomas, and Brandon Bennett, the wide receiver out of Heritage. Anyone there kind of spark
Well,
your interest?
Cooper's a freak. Cooper is being recruited by everybody, and he can play running back. He can play receiver. He can play safety. He's an absolute phenom. I never forget in sixth grade, he won. I don't know if he won the MVP or not, but he caught the extra point touchdown in an overtime football hotbed sixth grade middle school game. And that was like his sort of arrival because he hadn't been one of those heralded guys or guys that people talked about up to that point. Because usually when you get into those games, guys have been doing it since they were 8, 9, 10 years old. He was one of those guys that kind of was overlooked. And that was the first time it was like, oh, okay, this kid's going to be special. And we went to Cardinal Gibbons, had a great year last year. And as a sophomore, now he transfers to Power Chaminade, National Power Chaminade. And it's like, it looks like they put him at running back and they got another big time back. And so that's consistent with what they've had over the years. And Sean Shivers, Thaddeus Franklin, Davion Goss, who's now at North Carolina, and the list just goes on and on.
And Jabari Brady, I've read nothing but amazing stuff about this kid.
Yeah, Brady's a freakish type kid. He's a guy that competes for the ball really well when it's in the air. He has great, ability to jump and make contested catches. He's a two-way guy coming out of Monarch. He did transfer to Chaminade as well. And you lose probably one of the best receiving cores ever, and then you replace him with guys like Jabari Brady and Kobe Williams and guys like that. So very exciting times in Hollywood, Florida, and Chaminade right now.
Miami has a couple of guys that they've gotten commitments from on this list. Chris Ewald, the cornerback out of Chaminade. Malachi Toney, of course, we knew about that from Heritage at number 8. And then you go down the list and you find Dante Simpson, the defensive lineman out of Chaminade as well. A bunch of these guys are undecided, so there's still a lot to choose from there.
Yeah, no, in Miami, a lot of what they're waiting to do is kind of see how they start. And then they're going to close in on some other guys to finish this class out in December.
All right, so in Miami-Dade, the number 1 is the wide receiver out of Northwestern, Calvin Russell. And, you just hear, I guess he didn't he start as a quarterback, and now he's a wide receiver, bona fide wide receiver.
So the deal is with him, as a freshman, he came off the bench. He was the third string emergency quarterback. And he almost beat Christopher Columbus in a year where they went on to win the state championship. And literally didn't even know the plays. That's how freakish of an athlete he is. He's going to focus strictly on wide receiver. He's about 6'5" basketball kid. He's a 25 to 30 point guy a night in basketball. Just a really good athlete. And so no surprise there that he's the number 1 guy in Miami-Dade.
Go somewhere and play 2 sports. Why not? And then you got Javari Flowers, the cornerback from Northwestern. Jordan Campbell, the linebacker who's committed to Miami out of Carroll City. Cortez Mills, the wide receiver out of Homestead, committed to Oklahoma. And Ben Hanks Jr., the cornerback out of Booker T, who is undecided. Those are your top 5 in Miami-Dade. Anything stand out about those kids?
Hanks is a ball hawk freak. I expect him to go to Florida like his dad did.
Yep.
Jabari Flowers is a state championship 100-meter runner. Very talented, 5'10", almost 5'11", great speed. Transfers from Central over to Northwestern, where his dad, also went to school. Being coveted by a lot of programs. Texas is one of those, and that's a real strong list when you talk about Cortez Mills going to Oklahoma. He's injured, so that's kind of unfortunate. You won't see him. I think he has, something in his shoulder, collarbone area. So he'll be out for a few weeks. But at the end of the day, that's why you like Miami-Dade County. There's a tremendous amount of talent. And Miami should be able to reel in a few of those pieces. And a lot of that is going to depend on their record from the outset. So as I said, it's how they start. And it's really about the class of 26 because 25 recruiting is essentially done.
Yeah, and Miami already has commitments from a couple of good central defenders, Amari Wallace, the safety, and the other one is Ezekiel Marcelin from Central as well, the linebacker. So a couple of good commits there, but a bunch of undecideds as well.
Yeah, those undecideds are going to be key. Miami in this class, I think, this is sort of a luxury class because you had a really strong cast last year. There's not a tremendous amount of need, but you want to start, looking at the receiver position and trying to continue to be special there.
Yeah, it would be nice to continue to bring in top wide receiver talent, especially if they're local. That always helps things. All right, Brandon. It's been a fun one. We've gotten some good nuggets out there for the fans to chew on, some things to think about, a little bit of information, all that stuff. We will continue to do it. Folks, hey, we do our best to try to give you what we got, man. So keep it locked here, and we will talk to you next time here on the Real Ones Canes podcast. Peace!